Next, on a special edition of Newton Newsmakers, Newton goes back to school and there's new leadership at the head of the class. Lots to talk about: standardized testing, class size, extended learning, and what's the plan to continue providing educational excellence in a time of diminishing resources. Parents, educators, students, we'll find out next with the new superintendent of the Newton Public School System, Dr. David Fleishman, in his first interview since starting his new job. So get out your number 2 pencils. There may be a quiz later. Newton Newsmakers starts right now.
Newton Newsmakers is made possible through the generous support of First Commons Bank, Beacon Street in Newton Center, representing the future of banking with an inviting environment, the latest banking technologies, and a personal touch to make banking convenient, simple, and sensible. Also at firstcommonsbank.com.
Welcome into Newton Newsmakers. It's Newton's local political roundtable discussion program. I'm Charlie Shapiro. With 15 elementary schools, 4 middle schools, 2 high schools, 11,000 students, the Newton Public School System is a complex entity. Nobody is learning how complex it is faster than Dr. David Fleishman. He's Newton's new superintendent of public schools. He joins us here on Newton Newsmakers in his first major interview since taking the reins. And Dr. Fleishman, welcome, and thank you very much for coming into Newton Newsmakers and joining us in the city of Newton as the new superintendent. It's great to have you.
Thanks, Charlie. Nice to be here.
Great. So a little bit about your background first, the basics. You're from Brookline. You've been at Chappaqua, New York for the past 5 years. Fill us in a little bit.
Sure. I was previously the superintendent in Chappaqua, New York, which is in Westchester County. It's most well known for the home of the Clintons. It's also home of an excellent school system. I've also worked locally in Massachusetts as an assistant superintendent in Wellesley, as an assistant superintendent in Ossining, New York, and then I had the privilege to work as a teacher and administrator in New York City. So, and earlier I worked in kind of Washington, in New York, and local government. So I've had kind of a wide-ranging career. Okay. Enjoyed it all, and looking forward to the new assignment as well.
Well, the whole city is excited to have you here. Obviously, we had Jeff Young for a good chunk of time. Jim Marini did just an incredibly great job filling in for a year as an interim superintendent. There was a search process, a wealth of candidates, frankly. Everybody wants to run the Newton school system for some reason or another. Why do you think it's such a desirable position?
Sure. I think for a couple of reasons. First of all, Newton is a community with a long history of support for education and educational excellence. It's a place where people are passionate about education. I've described Newton as a spirited community. And also it's the people that work in the system. Dedicated people, teachers, administrators, staff, just a wonderful team of people in the system. And so I'm really looking forward to it. It's also a place that I think is always looking to get better. Students in Newton do very well, and I think all school systems can do better, and I think there's a real commitment to that, and I look forward to being a part of that.
Great. So when you start a new position like this, there's a certain amount of political capital, for lack of a better phrase, that comes with it. Can you prioritize how you plan to spend that political capital in the first year, getting things that you feel, if you're going to get them done, you will get them done in the first year because of that initial clout that you bring to the position?
Yeah, I'll take a step back and talk about starting the position, because before even taking actions that you're talking about, the most important thing to do in a leadership position like this is really learn the system and learn the city. Because I've seen leaders move very quickly on initiatives without learning the context. So what I've been spending, even before I got here and during this interview process, is what have been the initiatives in Newton over the past several years? What's worked? What hasn't worked? Where do people think the system can improve? And so I'm spending my entry time where I'm meeting with all different kinds of people, and we'll continue to do that for the next several months to establish how I'll move forward. So it's really about beginning by listening and learning, and then it's moving forward. So that's kind of the process I am right now.
So you've done, I guess, an initial listening tour.
Yes, although I'm just still in that part of the listening tour. You know, I've met with all the principals in the system, all the central office. I've met with the leadership.
Have you met with them one-to-one, or do you meet in groups? How do you go about that process?
That's a good question. I also met with the leadership of the Teachers Association, new leader Mike Zillis. I initially, with principals, try to do one-on-one meetings. It takes a great deal of time, but what I find is I can learn about issues in their buildings. You know, you noted that Newton has 21 schools, plus they also have a preschool, so it's really like 22, and to learn issues that are specific to their buildings, and also what do principals think of systems issues, and how can the system do their job better. So initially I prefer one-on-one, and then what I plan to do once school starts is be out in the buildings. So beginning September 13th, during 22 days of school, I plan to be in 22 buildings, one a day, to really spend time meeting with people. I can't do more than that because I like focusing on one building for a couple of hours and really meeting people, listening, seeing what's going on in the classroom. So that's how I'll plan most of September, early October.
So you've done some listening. Clearly through the interview process, you demonstrated beyond a shadow of a doubt that you have done your research. I mean, there was nobody that I heard say anything other than positive things about, you know, here's a guy that takes it seriously, does his research. I mean, it was really rather impressive. And people were talking about that. And it was very, very obvious. So as part of the listening tour, what have you already discovered that you think Newton is doing exceptionally well? And let's just start with that.
Sure. I think Newton is exceptionally well in terms of thinking about moving forward with initiatives trying to address all students. Newton's a place that has a long history of, I think, having initiatives for students who do very, very well, and for students who are average students and students who struggle. And I think there's a real effort to move that forward in terms of initiatives. And so I should talk about, when I talk about my job broadly, I think there's the educational part of the job, but then there's also the managerial part of the job. There's the dealing with school facilities, which I'm sure we'll talk about, and there's the financial aspect of the job, and then there's the really dealing with the community. So there are different parts of the job, and I think I need to address all of them. And educationally, I think the challenge for Newton is to figure out what are those initiatives that are really doing well, what's really working well, what are things that maybe we don't need to do anymore, and what are those? I think those are the questions I'm really asking right now. And students are clearly doing very well by a lot of quantitative and qualitative measures, but I'm more interested in what are the imperfections, because I actually think the health of a school district is measured by what are the imperfections and what can we actually do better. So those, I don't have the answers yet because I've only been here a month, but those are some of the questions, and then move forward from there. I think some of the efforts that are going on right now where teachers are working in teams using data, you know, we have data now on students that we didn't have before. That's incredibly important. Taking a look at some of the gaps in achievement among students from different backgrounds, that's a high priority. And then the school environment. I've certainly heard in meeting with principals, and I know dealing with the buildings and the facilities, that's a challenge. And then there's also getting Newton North open, which is exciting. I took a tour on Tuesday with Jen Price, the principal, and so that's certainly an exciting venture.
It's a gorgeous facility, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, obviously it should be for the investment that Newton has chosen to make, but it really is
the
a
learning
beautiful
environment
facility.
will be incredible.
It really is something that I think everybody's going to be extremely proud of over the course. And I know you weren't really specific about a particular things. I know you're trying to look at, you know, holistically possibly, but let me ask you something that I would like you to be very specific about, just an opinion, if nothing else. The governor, as you know, just recently endorsed national standards to take the place of statewide standards. Massachusetts, to my understanding, has always had what we would generally consider to be higher, stricter standards in many places, in many cases, and Newton probably even higher than the state.
Right.
First of all, do you feel comfortable that the switching to state, from state to federal standards will in fact have no negative impact on the education that students receive here in Newton?